Hi everyone, today let's see how the US companies are doing. Then we'll look at the data, the charts, as well as my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So they say here US companies are actually doing awesome, and let's take a look at their reasoning. They say in Q3 we had 82% of companies surpassing expectations, but you could argue that expectations were pretty weak going into Q3, but still, that's a pretty good ratio. And in terms of year-over-year growth for Q3, you can see consumer services and consumer discretionaries beat massively. Financials and tech doing okay. Real estate right in the middle here doing well also. And then you have the overall S&Ps doing fairly well. And then energy being the laggard for Q3. We knew that was going to happen. They had a period of outperformance and that was going to normalize. We saw that coming. But we're seeing companies like Meta and Amazon in the discretionaries category doing very, very well. And they mention here they are amazingly profitable. They say we also saw industrials and consumer staples doing fairly well. Companies outside of that big seven that's been driving markets showing some pretty strong growth. And looking at revenue growth, you can see here real estate actually doing quite well. Discretionaries and communication services right at the top of the charts. Again, with energy being the laggard. And the S&Ps overall doing fairly well for Q3. And their takeaway here is that the seemingly inevitable recession has yet to materialize. We continue to see growth across the sectors. And now with these new revenues, we need to see even more of that converted into profits. In terms of earnings growth, healthcare, consumer services, information technologies, and consumer discretionaries leading the pack. Energy and real estate at the bottom here for earnings in terms of growth. So what does that mean for us as investors? It doesn't seem like a terrible time to keep buying stocks. Valuations are still a little bit high historically, but we are still seeing a strong economy with strong growth across various sectors and not just tech leading the way purely. Moving over to the economic calendar. PPI came in lower than expected. We thought that was going to happen based on what we saw with CPI. Retail sales came in better than expectations. Month over month, retail sales also doing well. Acknowledging that this is still on the negative side, but again, still better than expectations. And then Atlanta Fed also better than expectations for Q4 GDP. Then moving over to Thursday, we have jobless claims. As always, Philly Fed manufacturing, that could be interesting at 8:30. Got quite a few FOMC and Fed governors speaking here in the afternoon as well. And then Fed balance sheet, always interesting on Thursday. In terms of earnings, we had Cisco beating on the top and bottom line. They did put out weak guidance, so they sold off a little bit. Target doing well. Big beat on earnings. Slight beat on revenues. That's good to see. Walmart, definitely the superior of the two right now. That'll be tomorrow morning. That should be interesting. And that pretty much rounds it out for this week. But taking a quick look at next week, don't forget we have NVDA on the 21st after hours. Still have Lowe's, Medtronic, HP, Best Buy. Those are all fairly interesting. But again, that's next week. Moving over to Max Payne, still sitting around that 430 area, just stepped up by $1, 431 now. Stock price still way up here around 450. Put call ratio still very high. Total options up to almost 4.3 million. Definitely interesting. Top of the puts right now 451. Call wall 455. 450 also fairly interesting. Got some calls here at 440. And then your first kind of put strike there at 440 as well makes sense. 435 to 440 does make sense for a finish right in that zone. Could be interesting. 440 to 445 could be interesting as well if we start to see a continuation on the reversal that we saw at the end of the session today. Moving over to the charts, we got a little bit of a mixed day here. So we did rally in the pre-market, sold off pretty much throughout the day. Held my level at 448.74. After hours, we're continuing to hold that level. As long as that holds, we should look for that continuation up to 453.07. That could be interesting. Again, still watching Max Payne, waiting to see what happens there. Looking at the SPX, you can see we are almost overbought, just shy, basically did not step up at all. About half a point on RSI, interesting. And you can see that candle here, gap up. Doji didn't do much on the day. Momentum continues to step up, which is interesting. In terms of relative price action, you can see this high here from September. And we are just below this peak high here from the end of August. In terms of trend resistance, that's sitting up at 45.55, which would mean we would hit my upper level before we started to sell off. Again, this rally has been super aggressive, but as long as we continue to hold these levels and break resistance to the upside, you have to continue to trade it that way. Moving over to the NASDAQ on the hour and the daily, you can see very similar thesis. Gapped up, fell throughout the session. Did touch that next level here on the NASDAQ, which was interesting. 389.37. That was a big rally from current prices. We're up like $4.50. Then we fell all the way from that level to my 384.16 level. Touched it twice, one during the session and then one after hours. Again, as long as that level holds, we should be in good shape. But you do have to acknowledge the fact that we are right at this high going back to 20 July. This is an absolutely critical pivot point. That was the peak before this pretty substantial drop, which started this down channel for a bit, all the way into the zone on that 200 SMA before we saw this colossal run. So very critical point here. If that level breaks, then it's a lot of room up to that 403 area. Might need to do a little bit of research and throw some levels in here, but right now this is the zone that we're trading in. It does kind of look like a stall out at that level. If 384.16 breaks, watching for 381.54, as well as that 55 EMA here on the hourly chart sitting at 381.62. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. The Russell hit that 200 SMA. We talked about it doing that yesterday, and then it rejected very strongly from that level. Topped out on the day at 181.76, and then we ended up finishing down at 178.57. So big range on the day. Definitely could not hold those gains. This could be an initial test. Doesn't mean that we can't go higher tomorrow, but you do have to acknowledge this is a clear wick rejection. We closed below my level, 179.17. That is not what you want to see to the bull side. Everything in terms of structure on the shorter time frame still says this is going higher, but a clear zone of resistance at that 200 SMA on the daily chart. Moving over to the Dow, one of the stronger on the session, up 0.5%, gapped up, rallied, got very close to my next level at 150.92. Also wicked this high from the peak on 14 September. Really, I'm watching the peak high here on 31 August. Kind of that same price action as the SPY. Same zone. Again, pretty strong pivot point. Not as strong as the NASDAQ. That would be up here at the 1 August high at that 356.47, 356.48 area. Moving over to the equal weighted S&Ps, as long as this continues to be relevant, we'll continue to talk about it just about every day here. Right in a very critical zone, you can see that huge wick, very similar to the Russell. Took out both of those levels, initial test. We still closed above 145.08, which is interesting. Basically right on top of that 144 EMA. Momentum bullish, RSI bullish. Again, could be an initial test. Have that highly traded zone sitting here at 146.90. That's very critical right at this pivot point low and then the pivot point high here before that bigger move down. Definitely an interesting area. If that 200 breaks and we can hold above it, then we should be looking for a test of that level. And then to the upside, I have 149.82. Moving over to the SPX divided by the M2 money supply. I usually only look at this chart on the weekends, but I did want to highlight the push that we've had this week. You can see that massive candle right at those pivots, just like we have on the SPY chart, but really watching for a test of that 22.05 level. If we do get there, I do expect some kind of rejection. Last time we touched it, we broke all the way down to that 55 EMA. And similarly here, going back to 1 November of 22, that triggered the massive down move all the way to the lows here in June, as well as the October low. And zooming out a little bit, we've talked about it a lot of times on the channel. You can see that COVID high, same exact level, broke down from that area. Massive pivot point right there. It's not to say that we can't get above that level, at least in the short term, but that is a super critical level on this chart. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple slightly up 0.3% on the day. Did not touch my next level, did not touch this pivot point here, going back to 1 September. Basically no new information, same levels as yesterday, 186.81 and 189.96. Tesla, again, gapped higher, went sideways, stayed just above that 200 SMA on the 4-hour chart. That's good to see. As long as that level holds, you can look for a push up to 255.44. If that level breaks, then you're looking back down to 232.57. Moving over to NVIDIA and Meta, I just wanted to highlight these here today. Microsoft dropped off. They didn't really do very much here, but Meta, massive down move, 1.55%. Touched my next level, ended up holding there at 187.98. Did drop that level after hours. If we do see a continuation there, that could be bearish. Also got a step down on momentum, not what you would want to see there. Similarly on NASDAQ, big engulfing candle below my 333 level, and that's not what you would want to see. Obviously, next level for me, 321.68. Momentum stepping down, RSI stepping down. Meta didn't hit overbought conditions, but NVDA did, and now it's breaking down a little bit. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples gapped up, held in that zone, still watching 70.89, makes sense. Momentum did step down in the after hours. That's not what you would want to see. Zooming in here, you can see that price action, gap up, sideways chop. Overall, not bad. Nice little jump from the close here. 69.89 up to 70.30. Discretionaries gapped up and then fell throughout the session, closed basically unchanged on the day. Momentum stepping down, RSI super overbought on the 4-hour chart. And if this breaks below the SMA, similar to what we saw here, that should speak to a little bit more downside to come. Moving over to financials and oil and gas. Financials has had quite a run, similar to everything else. Consolidated broke higher. Strong day, 0.55%. Wick to these highs going back to 1 September, the same time frame we've been talking about. They do have a high here at $35. That seems attainable, at least on a test. Almost overbought, looking for that final push here into that zone, in my opinion. These have been helped with rates starting to go down. They do have a lot of losses on the balance sheet. And as rates go down, that softens the blow there. And looking at oil and gas, through a big wick, still positive on the day, but couldn't hold above 140.88. Again, looking for a hold on that level, push up to 145.92 makes sense. Momentum continues to step in the bullish direction. Moving over to breadth, 50-day average and 200-day averages, both positive on the day. 50-day average up to 68.78. Did not quite get to my level, 77.46, but you can see that 200-day average hit the 200-day average on the 200-day average. Momentum bullish, RSI bullish. Initial test in that zone. Almost touched my level at 52, right at these previous highs going back to 14 September. Makes sense. Could be an initial test. If we push through it tomorrow, we should be in good shape. If we reject from this zone, that is going to be critical in my opinion, and I would expect a little bit deeper pullback, maybe all the way down to 43 here on breadth. That would be interesting. Again, still very extended on this move, and a pullback will happen eventually, but we're not overbought quite yet. 50-day average, definitely overbought in the last 2 days. Moving over to the dollar, slight up move on the day, 0.3%, rejecting from that 104.41 level, tested it during the session, testing again here after hours. As long as this breaks down, takes out the 21, sitting at 104.24, that would be quite bullish for equities. But again, we're contending with that same type of zone, 144 EMA and 200 SMA sitting in that 103.64 area. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish, so I would expect to at least get a test of there. But if this area holds and we start to see a little bit of recovery on the dollar, that could be interesting. I would expect that to be weaker for equities. Moving over to volatility, MOVE index fell a little bit. Interesting, especially with yields staying mostly stable. They were up a little bit today. VIX continues to hold in this same zone, did not fall on the session even with the bullish move. And I do think that this is starting to consolidate in the zone, looking for a push higher here pretty soon, which would make sense with the max pain sitting all the way down at 431. Moving over to my accounts, I was down about $100 on the day. Not great. I got squeezed on that IWM move. I tried to roll up into it, and then it rolled over to the downside, and I had to roll down and out. Still in a pretty solid position there, but I have to wait now to see what happens. In terms of my calls, I did roll out one day on that 375 position. And then I rolled out a couple days up to 379 here. Got a little bit of profits to help protect me from some of the losses on those shares on the day. Overall, not great, but basically flat. In terms of my outlook, still looking for a potential pullback. Still have tons of protection on my Q's position. IWM at a little bit more risk going into tomorrow's session to the downside. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of the US economy and the S&P 500. Are there any stocks that you are buying or sectors that you're buying for the short or the long term? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. None of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.